back to our continuing podcast series with Elizabeth Inman. We closed last session with part 1 of 3 regarding your risk tolerance when it comes to your retirement planning. And so let's recap for a few minutes, and as we closed out our last session, we're going to get into more deeper conversation about what that really means. And Elizabeth, welcome back, by the way. Thank you.
Hi, Jeff. I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, and this is important information. So let's go back again. We did an overview in our last session of risk tolerance, but let's get into what that really means as we open up this session.
Well, Jeff, this is a topic, as you know, that's extremely near and dear to my heart, because when I ended my first career with the federal market, working in government service, I lost $78,000 in my own personal TSP, having a situation that occurred very similar to what happened in March of this year. So I love talking about risk tolerance. And, it's not a real technical term. It's just very simply, how much risk are we willing to take when it comes to our money, and especially our retirement funds? When I help someone understand what their risk tolerance is, I'm going to ask them questions like, well, how much risk are you under now with your funds? If you're in the TSP, what funds do you have your money invested in? How much risk are you willing to tolerate, both now and in the future? And then how much income do you need for the future? Those are all relevant questions when it comes to our risk analysis. And then the big kicker, Jeff, is I often will ask them to just close their eyes and to imagine their portfolio the way they have it now, their TSP funds, maybe an IRA, a 401k from a prior job or something. And then right now, you're just steps away from retiring, and 30% of it is just gone. What would that do to your retirement plans? And what would a sustained loss of 30% do to your retirement over the next 3 years? March came and went. We had a big loss of this year, but most people's experience that it's coming back pretty nicely. That's not always the case. So what would a sustained loss of 30 to 40% due to your retirement over the next few years? So, just since the beginning of this year alone, as I've mentioned before, I've worked with a federal employee that was retiring March the 31st. It got caught up in that big dip that took place in the market. And just 1 week prior to their retirement, they lost over 100,000 in their TSP. There was another person that came into my office and they lost 76,000. Now they're going to, hold off retiring for a little bit longer because of that loss, but it completely changed their plans for retirement. And all of that potentially could have had a different outcome if they just would have taken the time to assess their own risk number. How much risk are they willing to incur as close as they are to retirement, and use that number to help them take action to ward off those kind of situations. So, these are real life stories, and they're exactly why we do what we do today. Everybody needs to know, whether you're a federal employee or not a federal employee, you need to understand what your risk tolerance is and know what actions are necessary to help align your current funds with your future goals.
So for those attending, whether they're active federal employee or a retiree, how do they get a handle on a risk, on their risk assessment? How do you help them deal with that? Because I think, like you're talking about, the markets come back a little, but I'm telling you, it's really choppy out there. So I'm sure a lot of people might have been more of a risk taker a year ago right now. So how do you help them deal with that?
You bet choppy equates to very scary in my book.
Yeah.
So, for starters, I really work hard. I want to make this as simple as possible. The last thing in the world we want when we're winding down our career and we're getting to that golden date of retirement is a whole bunch of complicated stuff to have to go through. So, they can just simply go to my website. It's www.retirechoices.com. And up in the top right-hand side is a link that says, what's my risk score? So let me repeat that. What's my risk score? And if you'll click that button, you'll have a question pop up with a little bit of instructions on how to navigate going through 11 questions that's going to prompt a conversation. And when you finish answering those 11 questions, out comes this number that is your very own risk number. So this is using some of the technology we have available to us to help us reach a level of understanding about how that risk is going to affect our retirement. I mean, it had a major impact on my retirement myself, not understanding my own philosophy of risk. I mean, if somebody would have asked me a question right before I retired, I kind of shudder to think about the way I would have answered them, because quite frankly, Jeff, I was invested in the L fund in the TSP thinking I was being pretty doggone conservative. I'd hate to see what would have happened to my retirement funds if I hadn't been being conservative. So,
Right.
this will really help us start with a risk number, help us understand where we're at, and then really drill down in that conversation so that at the end of that conversation, that federal person will go, oh, I now understand my own thoughts about risk. It's not my thoughts, Jeff. It's not your thoughts. It is, how does that client, how does that federal employee or that federal retiree view risk at this moment in time in their life? So very, very important. It's changed. Retirement's changed in our federal sector. The old civil service system is all a pension-based retirement. They didn't draw Social Security because they didn't put into Social Security. All they had was a pension. So today, the FERS system, Federal Employees Retirement System, has moved us to an income-based retirement.
Yep.
We accumulate savings, thus the thrift savings plan. We accumulate savings throughout our life that then we turn around and we'll create an income from it for our retirement. It's one of the three legs of the three-legged stool that OPM talks about for the FERS retirees. So, as a federal employee, unless you're extremely disciplined to start very early and accumulate your own private funds, all of your retirement is going to be government-based. Every retirement, all the three legs of your retirement, three income streams, will be government-based, which is your pension. That's definitely a government annuity. Social Security, another government annuity, and then TSP, which if you turn that into income, will be a government annuity. So income in retirement's the only way we will survive. And making sure that every stream of income that we have is income-based is extremely important. Unless, of course, you're independently wealthy apart from your government job.
Right.
And that would always be nice.
That would be nice. Well, you mentioned I was addressing this with somebody else last week, but you brought up a good point, that it's not just risk in the market when you think about income-driven retirement. So you mentioned the pension, government-backed, Social Security, government-backed, TSP, turned into income, government-backed. So that's something you address with your clients also, about diversifying, maybe with the thrift savings plan. It sometimes is wise to move that in retirement to something that's not government-centric, correct?
For some people, Jeff, after they've been educated and they know the ins and outs of all three of those government income-based annuities, they may make the decision to stay with that, and that's their prerogative, and I always want to give them that option. But besides that option, what I want to do is educate them to the point that they do realize there are some diversification options out there. There are some
Right.
other bells and whistles even that's available for them that might enhance what they've worked so hard to save up all this time and to turn it into lifetime income, not just income for the first 10 years of retirement. But I mean, we're living longer. I mean, federal employees just had a rate decrease in 2018 on their FEGLI, and it's because they've changed the longevity tables because we're living longer. And with that, comes that thought, sometimes that fear of, oh my gosh, what if I run out of money? So
Right.
lifetime income, income-based retirement are things we want to look at so that we've educated our clients to where they make the best decision for themselves.
Well, and that's why they need a plan, right? You need to have a
That's
strategic
right.
plan. And I think when times are really good, we all know that, but we kind of get away from it because you see your
That's
portfolio growing, things are kind of
oh,
good, but life has a way of
Jeff,
changing.
you brought up a really good point. One of the things I've witnessed in the last 10 years since my own retirement is, the market, we went through 11 years without a market correction. And I literally watched people who came through that 2008 to 2010 recession, with a little bit of leeriness, gain this momentum, watching their portfolios grow, watching those TSP funds grow. And literally, I've had somebody in my office right before this happened that I said, hey, you're getting closer to retirement. 100% of everything you've got in your TSP is at risk. You might just want to consider some other options. And they just kind of shook their head at me and said, I've done good. I've made a lot of money. And unfortunately, they're one of the ones that took a great big hit after the March downturn that we had. And thank goodness they weren't retiring right then, or they wouldn't have ever got that back. So again, this risk, understanding the risk strategy, knowing what your risk tolerance is so important. I went in myself way after the fact and took my, wanted to know what my risk number was. So here I'd lost that 78,000. I know what steps
Yeah.
I've taken in the last 10 years. And you'll probably, Jeff, because you know me pretty well, you'll probably be a little surprised, but my number actually came back at a 33. And I looked at that number and I said, oh, no, no way. I'm not risking my money anymore in the market. Now, that's a personal decision. That's me personally. But what happened is when I looked at the way I answered those questions that spit out that number 33, I myself had my own conversation about the way I've got my portfolio aligned. So I don't recommend the do-it-yourself retirement. It's just not very wise. I mean, even myself answering the number, I came back with a 33, and I don't want to risk 33% of my funds now that I've retired the first time. Thank you very much.
Well, and that goes to show you that, and probably the main reason you do what you do now is because people need a helping hand. They really do, and sometimes we just get overwhelmed with all these decisions. And when you look at the FERS and some of those out there still have the SIRS, that the changes, it's confusing. Then you have Social Security. Somebody told me last week there's like 700 choices. I didn't know that. I mean,
I didn't
700
either.
different options that you could
Isn't that
put yourself
amazing?
into depending on your situation.
Yeah. Where were you when I got ready to retire, Jeff? Yeah, you're right. Everything I do is based on what I went through when I did my own federal retirement. So, and I didn't have a Jeff I could call. I didn't have an Elizabeth I could call. But you know what? Today they can call and they can get the help they need.
Well, I do as we close up this session. I do think it's important life experiences. Before we started the recording today, you and I were talking about a life experience of somebody that has turned their life around and now on the right track, but they can use that life experience to hopefully help somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I think financially, we all need to come together and find the right people to help us along the way. When it comes to federal benefits, I'm going to say this is an endorsement to Elizabeth. Right now we've had a great run on the market. I think those days are over. I can't say that for sure, but if we look around the world right now, things are changing. We're in a world that I don't think any of us a year ago, 2 years ago would have ever thought right now. So, with that being said, it's an election year. This pandemic is still everywhere. We got riots going on in cities, and the market is teetering. So, with that being said, somebody like Elizabeth can assist each of you in just making sure that you have a plan. And we talked about that number 33, Elizabeth, and what we're going to get into in the next session is how to drill down to each of you if you want and find out what that number really means to you. We'll share with you how you arrive at that number, how you can get the risk test. It's based on a 1 out of 100 scale, but it'll really help you kind of at the starting gate to determine, okay, like with you, Elizabeth, the 33, now you're kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not aligned with my finances the way that psychologically I should be. And that goes a long way in making somebody comfortable and sleep better at night because you don't want to have a 30-40% correction in the market. When we got into the federal space in 2008, what a year to start, right? The real estate market crash, and 30% to 35% of somebody's market share in their TSP, losing that was not out of the question. And I'm sure you saw a lot of that yourself.
Absolutely. I sure did. And I experienced it myself.
So let's learn from the past. And so our next session, we're going to talk about actions that the employees can put into place. It starts with that risk number, right?
Correct.
And then we can start them on a path to a more solid strategic retirement plan. So our next broadcast, we're going to get into the 5 steps to counter risk in retirement. So you're going to want to look for the next episode to be uploaded next week. 5 steps to counter risk in retirement. We're going to dive into more of the risk number and putting a plan together. In the meantime, Elizabeth, how can somebody get a hold of you? If they have questions, could you give your website again?
It's www.retirechoices.com.
Retirechoices.com. You can also give us a call at 888-545-8840 and let us know you're on the podcast. You'd like to take the risk test. You'd like to have a complimentary consultation, virtual consultation these days with Elizabeth. She's serving federal employees nationwide, and with her experience both as a federal employee and now 10 plus years, right, as an advisor.
That's correct. Yes.
She's seen both sides of this, and she's dedicated her life to helping each of you. So again, 888-545-8840. Let us know you attended the podcast. We'll get you in touch with Elizabeth. You can also go to our fedchecklist.com website, put a question or comment in there. You can download a retirement report along with a budget and a retirement worksheet. So we have that on the site, and you can also leave a question for Elizabeth there. So this concludes our session. Thanks again, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Jeff. I enjoyed my time with you. Thank you.
And we'll be back. We'll do it again.
Sounds good.
So, okay, look for the next episode, and this concludes our session today. Thank you, everybody.